What happens when a poor kid buys coffee for a millionaire? In the quaint, sleepy town of Willow Grove, Ohio, nestled among tree-lined streets where the golden hues of autumn painted the sidewalks, life moved at a gentle, unhurried pace. The annual county fair, with its Ferris wheel lights twinkling against the dusk and the scent of caramel apples wafting through the air, was the heartbeat of the community, a tradition that brought neighbors together in laughter and warmth. Amid this backdrop lived an 8-year-old boy named Liam Carter, a skinny child with a mop of messy brown hair and a shy smile that could melt the coldest heart. Liam was a familiar face around town, often seen dragging a rake twice his size to help elderly neighbors clear their yards of leaves or balancing grocery bags for Mrs. Thompson, the librarian, as she shared stories of her youth. Despite his tender age, Liam had learned to hustle, collecting bottles and cans along the quiet streets to earn a few cents. Money he'd saved to help his grandma Evelyn, who had raised him single-handedly since his parents succumbed to the grip of addiction and disappeared from his life. Every afternoon after finishing his small chores, Liam would stop by Grove Street Store, a small, run-down shop tucked beneath an old, weathered building on the edge of town. The store's faded sign creaked in the wind, its paint peeling to reveal the passage of time, but inside, it was a haven of warmth. The shop was run by Ray Bennett, a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a round, weathered face and a warm grin that lit up the dim interior like a lantern on a cold night. Ray's laughter often echoed through the store as he chatted with customers, his voice a comforting rumble. But behind his cheerful demeanor, Ray struggled to keep the store afloat, scraping by to pay the rent each month. The old building's landlord was a constant shadow over his shoulder, and Ray often stayed late into the night, tallying receipts with a furrowed brow, hoping to make ends meet. Yet no matter how tight money was, Ray never hesitated to help Liam or anyone else in need. He'd slip Liam a cookie or a small bag of gummy candies, his eyes twinkling as he called it payment for the boy's help with sweeping the dusty floors or stacking cans on the wobbly shelves. To Liam, Ray's store was more than just a shop. It was a second home, a sanctuary where the weight of his worries melted away, and he could simply be a kid, laughing and dreaming like any other child. On a chilly October morning, with the air crisp and the scent of fallen leaves lingering, a new face entered Grove Street Store. Michael Langston, a man in his early 40s, stepped through the door, the bell above jingling softly. Michael was a calm, kind-faced man with short black hair, gentle brown eyes, and a demeanor that allowed him to blend effortlessly into any small-town crowd. Dressed in a crisp white button-up shirt, khaki pants, and simple black shoes, he looked like an average guy. No one would guess he was a tech millionaire who had built a fortune in Silicon Valley. A subtle, elegant watch on his wrist was the only hint of his wealth, but even that was understated. Michael had grown up in Willow Grove, a child of humble beginnings, and after years of success in the bustling tech world, he had returned to his roots, driven by a deep desire to give back to the town that had shaped him. He was searching for the perfect spot to launch a community project, a dream he'd nurtured for years to honor the kindness he'd once received as a struggling child. As he stepped into the cramped little shop, housed under a weathered old building with peeling paint and creaky floors, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. The store's faded walls and the faint smell of old wood and coffee grounds reminded him of simpler days. Behind the counter stood Ray Bennett, a heavy-set man in his 50s, his red plaid shirt slightly frayed at the cuffs but his smile as big as ever. Ray was joking with an elderly customer, Mrs. Harper, about the price of potatoes, his hearty laugh filling the air as he restocked a shelf with canned goods. "You're charging me for gold, Ray," Mrs. Harper teased, her wrinkled hands clutching a small basket. Ray chuckled. "Only the best for you, Mrs. Harper." Michael watched the exchange, a soft smile tugging at his lips. This tiny store, though worn and struggling, felt like a piece of his childhood, a place where kindness still lived, untouched by the passage of time. Michael grabbed a can of instant coffee and a pack of oatmeal cookies from a shelf, the crinkle of the packaging a familiar sound from his youth. He placed them on the counter with a friendly nod to Ray, who swiped his card through the ancient POS machine. The device let out a series of grumpy beeps, its screen flashing an error message. "Dang it, this old thing's acting up again," Ray muttered, scratching his head with an apologetic grin. "Give me a sec to restart it." Liam, who had been sweeping the dusty floor nearby with a broom twice his size, overheard the exchange. The little boy paused, his small hands digging into the frayed pocket of his jeans. He pulled out a handful of coins, mostly pennies and nickels, scraped together from collecting bottles and cans around Willow Grove. With a determined look that made him seem older than his 8 years, Liam marched to the counter, stood on tiptoes and plunked his coins down in a scattered pile. "I got this, Mr. Ray, it's on me," he said, his voice earnest but proud, his cheeks flushed with the effort of reaching the counter. A few coins rolled off, clinking softly on the wooden floor, but Liam's eyes shone with sincerity. Michael, caught off guard by the tiny kid's big gesture, blinked in surprise and waved his hands. "Whoa, buddy, you don't have to do that. I've got cash right here," he said, pulling a $20 bill from his wallet. But Liam shook his head, his brown eyes gleaming with a fierce kind of determination. "It's okay, sir. My grandma says you gotta live kind. If someone's good to you pass it on," he explained, his voice small but firm. He glanced at the coins, then added softly, "These are all I got, but I want to help." Michael's heart melted at the boy's pure, selfless spirit. He crouched down to Liam's level, his smile warm and genuine. "You're something else. Kid, that's the kindest thing I've seen in a long time," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. He handed Ray the $20 bill, chuckling. "Keep the change for this guy's next snack, all right?" Ray, carefully counting Liam's coins, let out a hearty laugh. "This boy's 1 in a million, Michael. Heart of gold, I tell you," he said, ruffling Liam's hair affectionately. Liam beamed, clutching his broom like a trophy, then turned to Ray. "Thanks, Mr. Ray. I gotta get home to help Grandma with dinner," he said, his voice bright with excitement. Ray reached over the counter, slipping a small bag of gummy candies into Liam's hand with a wink. "You tell your grandma I said hi, okay? And take this for the road," he said warmly. Liam's face lit up, his shy smile breaking into a full grin. "Wow, thanks. See you tomorrow, Mr. Ray." With a quick wave, Liam darted out the door, his sneakers scuffing the pavement as he headed home, the bag of candies swinging in his hand. Ray watched him go, shaking his head with a fond smile, his eyes soft with affection. Minutes after Liam's departure, the bell above Grove Street store jingled again, its sound sharp in the quiet that followed. A stern-looking man in a grey suit strode in. Harold Jacobs, the landlord of the creaky old building that housed Ray's shop. Harold's presence filled the small space with tension, his polished shoes clicking ominously on the wooden floor. Ray, who had been wiping down the counter with a rag, froze, his usual grin fading as if a cloud had passed over the sun. "Mr. Jacobs," he said, his voice tight with anxiety, his hands gripping the rag a little too hard. "I was just about to call you." Harold crossed his arms, his face hard and unyielding, his sharp eyes scanning the store with disapproval. "Save it, Ray. You promised the rent by last Friday, and I'm still waiting." "This is the 4th month you're late," he barked, his tone cold and impatient. Ray sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging as he pulled a stack of crumpled bills and receipts from under the counter, his hands trembling slightly. "I know. I'm sorry. Business has been slow, and the POS machine's busted. I've been losing sales because of it. I'm working on it, I swear. Just give me till the end of the week," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. Harold shook his head, his expression unyielding as he pointed at the door with a sharp gesture. "No more excuses, Ray. You owe me $10,000 by Monday, or I'm padlocking this place and finding a new tenant. Don't make me do it," he warned, his voice like ice. With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind him, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Ray leaned on the counter, his head in his hands, muttering to himself, "How am I going to pull this off?" His voice was barely a whisper, laced with fear and exhaustion, as the weight of his situation pressed down on him like a storm cloud. Michael, who had been lingering by a shelf of canned goods pretending to browse while listening to the exchange, felt his jaw tighten. He saw the worry etched deep into Ray's face, the lines around his eyes deepening with each passing second. The scene stirred memories of Michael's own struggles, days when he'd been a hungry child, scrounging for scraps, relying on the kindness of strangers to survive. Those memories fueled a growing resolve within him, a determination to act. He couldn't let Ray lose the store, not when it was a lifeline for kids like Liam, a beacon of kindness in a town that needed it. Michael slipped out of the store quietly, his mind already racing with a plan, his heart set on making a difference, the key. Next day, Michael returned to Willow Grove, still buzzing with the warmth of doing something right. He had spent the previous evening making calls, pulling strings with old contacts in real estate to secure Ray's future. With his wealth, Michael had the power to change lives, and he was determined to start with Grove Street Store. As he walked through the town's quiet streets, the crunch of fallen leaves under his shoes and the crisp autumn air filling his lungs, he spotted Liam outside the town diner, clutching a small paper bag. Clara, a kind-eyed waitress with graying hair who'd worked at the diner for as long as anyone could remember, was handing it to him with a gentle pat on his shoulder. Clara's apron was stained with coffee, and her smile was tired but genuine, a testament to her years of serving the community. Curiosity piqued, Michael approached just as Liam thanked Clara and started to walk away, his small frame hunched against the chilly breeze. "Hey, Clara," Michael called, nodding toward the boy as he adjusted his scarf. "What was in that bag you gave Liam? Looked important." Clara sighed, her face softening with concern, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her apron. "Medicine for his grandma Evelyn. She's got diabetes and a bad heart, but they can't afford all the prescriptions. I slip Liam what I can from the pharmacy when my tips are good. It's not much, but it helps. Poor kid's been through it. His parents got lost to drugs years ago, left him with Evelyn. She's all he's got," she explained, her voice heavy with sympathy, her eyes following Liam as he kicked a pebble down the sidewalk. Michael's chest tightened, the weight of Liam's struggles hitting him like a wave. He thanked Clara, his voice soft but resolute, and jogged to catch up with Liam, who was now a few yards ahead, his sneakers scuffing the pavement. "Hey, Liam," Michael called, holding up a bag of cookies and snacks he'd picked up from Ray's store earlier. "Brought you something." Liam's eyes lit up, but his smile was cautious, his small hands clutching the paper bag of medicine, tightly. "For me?" "Why?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion, but also a flicker of hope. Michael sat on a nearby bench, the wood cold against his legs, and motioned for Liam to join him. The bench overlooked a small park where children played, their laughter echoing faintly in the distance, a stark contrast to Liam's quiet demeanor. "Because you're a good kid, and I want to know more about you. What's your story?" Michael asked gently, his tone encouraging. Liam hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the bag before he opened up, his small voice steady but heavy with emotion. "My parents left when I was little. They're not okay. Grandma says they'll come back, but I don't think so. She's sick a lot, so I help with chores and stuff, laundry, dishes, whatever I can do. I don't want her to worry," he said, his eyes downcast, his small shoulders bearing a burden far too big for his age. Michael nodded, his heart aching with recognition. Liam's words echoed his own childhood, a time when he'd felt the same weight of responsibility, the same fear of losing the only family he had. "I get it, Liam. I've been there." "Want to hear a story?" he asked, his voice soft but inviting. Liam's eyes widened, and he nodded eagerly, scooting closer on the bench. "Okay, let's sit here," Michael said, patting the spot beside him. "There was a boy who was left to live on the streets after his parents abandoned him. His stomach growled from hunger, a constant ache that never went away. The young boy went on a quest to buy a meal, wandering from store to store, but he didn't have enough money, just a few pennies he'd found in the gutter. Just when all his hopes were dashed, when he thought he'd have to go another day, without food, a hero came to his rescue, a woman who paid for his meal just to be kind. The boy thanked her, his voice trembling with gratitude, and asked how he could repay her for her noble deed. She smiled, her eyes warm, and told the boy that the best way to repay her was to do a good deed for someone else in need, making the world a little better in the process. That kind lady didn't stop there. She helped that boy get into the foster system, giving him a chance at a new life. And after some time, he found a new, wonderful family that gave him an incredible life, filled with love and opportunity. That boy was me when I was little. You know, she helped me, and that was incredible. All I wanted to do was study hard and work even harder to build this fortune, so I could help as many people as I could, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes distant as he relived those memories. Liam listened, his mouth slightly agape, his eyes shining with awe. "Wow, I want to do that when I grow up," he exclaimed, his voice filled with determination, his small fists clenched with resolve. Michael smiled, ruffling Liam's messy hair affectionately. "And that's why I know you're gonna do big things, kid," he replied, his tone warm and encouraging, his heart swelling with hope for the boy's future. Inspired by Liam's courage and resilience, Michael knew he had to meet the grandma who'd raised such a remarkable child. "Can I come see your place, Liam? I'd love to meet your grandma," he asked, his voice gentle but earnest. Liam's face lit up, his earlier caution replaced by excitement. "Sure, Grandma loves company," he said, jumping off the bench, and leading the way, his small steps quick and eager. They walked through the quieter streets of Willow Grove, past rows of modest houses with porches adorned with pumpkins and autumn wreaths, until they reached a shabby apartment above the town's laundromat. The building was old, its paint peeling, and the hum of washing machines echoed faintly from below. Inside, Evelyn greeted them with a frail but radiant smile, her hands trembling slightly as she poured tea into chipped ceramic cups. She was a small woman, her hair a soft grey and a simple silver necklace with a tiny cross glinted on her neck, catching the dim light of the apartment. The room was modest, with faded wallpaper and a worn kitchen table covered in a checkered cloth, but it was filled with warmth. Photographs of Liam as a baby adorned the walls, and a small vase of wildflowers sat on the windowsill, a touch of beauty in the otherwise sparse space. They sat around the table, swapping stories about Willow Grove, the town they all loved in their own way. Evelyn's voice was soft but rich with memory as she spoke of her days as a young teacher, her laughter filling the room as she recalled the children she'd taught. Evelyn handed Michael a cup of tea, her hand steadying as she smiled gently. "You seem like quite a young man. What's someone like you doing in this rundown part of the city?" she asked, her tone curious but kind, her eyes searching his face. Michael took a sip of the tea, the warmth spreading through him, and smiled back. "I was actually raised in this neighborhood, so you could call this my turf. I came back to reconnect with my roots and get some inspiration for a project, to decide what to do with my money, actually. A long time ago, I made a promise to someone that I would build this fortune and use it to repay this kindness," he explained, his voice steady but filled with meaning, his gaze drifting to the window where the autumn light filtered through. As Evelyn adjusted her necklace, Michael froze, his gaze locking on the tiny silver cross. That cross, he'd seen it before, decades ago, on a woman who'd fed him when he was a starving child, wandering the streets with nothing but hunger and despair. His heart raced, memories flooding back like a tidal wave. "Evelyn," he said, his voice shaky with emotion. "Did you wear that necklace back at Harper's Bakery in the 90s? Evelyn touched the cross, her brow furrowing in puzzlement, then asked softly, "Tell me, were you abandoned as a child?" Her voice was gentle, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Michael burst into emotion, his voice trembling as tears welled up. It's you. Oh my gosh, I've been looking for you for so long, for so many years," he said, his hands shaking as he reached out to her. Evelyn's eyes widened, her own tears spilling over as she gasped. You're Mikey, little Mikey Langston," she whispered, her voice breaking as Michael nodded, his own eyes misty. "It was you, Evelyn. You gave me those sandwiches, kept me alive. I never forgot you," he said, his voice thick with gratitude, his heart pounding with the joy of reunion. Liam bounced in his seat, wide-eyed and amazed. "Grandma, you helped Mr. Michael," he exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. Evelyn reached for Michael's hand, sobbing softly, her frail fingers warm against his. "I knew you looked familiar. Look at the man you've become." "I'm so proud of you, Michael," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, her smile radiant through her tears. Michael squeezed her hand, his voice choked with emotion. "I've been looking for you for so long, for so many years." "Where have you been?" he asked, his eyes searching hers, desperate to understand the years that had separated them. Evelyn sighed, her gaze drifting to Liam, her expression a mix of sorrow and hope. "I moved after Liam was born. I gave the place to my daughter so she could start her family, but it all fell apart. She got hooked on drugs, her and her husband. They left Liam with me, too ashamed of what they had become, but I know they'll be back after they get clean," she explained, her voice heavy with the weight of her family's struggles, but also with a quiet faith that things would get better. After the conversation, Michael stood to leave, his heart full, but his mind already racing with plans to help. "I've got to go soon, I've got to take care of something, but I will be back. Don't worry. You know what, when I come back, neither one of you will ever have to worry about money ever again," he promised, his voice firm with determination, his eyes shining with resolve as he gave Liam a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Over the next few weeks, Michael worked tirelessly behind the scenes, using his resources to make a difference. He started with Ray Bennett, knowing the store was a cornerstone of the community. One crisp morning, as the first frost of the season dusted the ground, Ray stood behind the counter of Grove Street store, his heart heavy with the looming threat of losing his shop. The bell above the door jingled, and Harold Jacobs, the landlord, walked in, his grey suit as stern as ever. Ray tensed, expecting another harsh demand for overdue rent, his hands gripping the edge of the counter, but Harold's usual scowl was gone, replaced by an awkward half-smile that caught Ray off guard. "Ray," he said, clearing his throat, his tone softer than Ray had ever heard. "You don't owe me a dime anymore. The rent's been cleared." Before Ray could respond, Harold slid an envelope across the counter, his eyes avoiding Ray's gaze. "Take a look," he added, his voice almost gentle. Ray's hands shook as he opened the envelope, pulling out a document that made his breath catch, a deed, declaring him the owner of the old building that housed his store, gifted by Michael. "Langston, Michael, he bought this whole place for me?" Ray stammered, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes wide with disbelief. Harold nodded, a rare smile breaking through his stern facade. "Sahi said you're the glue of Willow Grove, Ray. Wants this shop to stay yours forever," he explained, his tone softer now, as if he too was moved by Michael's gesture. Ray sank onto a stool behind the counter, tears spilling down his cheeks. The deed clutched tightly in his hands like a lifeline. He tried to speak, to thank Harold, to process the miracle that had just unfolded, but words wouldn't come. All he could do was shake his head in disbelief, overwhelmed by Michael's boundless kindness that had saved his livelihood. For the first time in months, Ray felt a weight lift off his shoulders, a sense of hope blooming in his chest as he looked around the store, his store, with new eyes. Across town, in the small apartment above the laundromat, Evelyn Carter sat, at her kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming in her hands, the aroma of chamomile filling the air. Months ago she'd been frail, her diabetes and heart condition draining her strength, her face pale with worry for Liam's future. Every cough, every ache had been a reminder of her fragility, a constant fear that she wouldn't be there to see Liam grow up. Now, thanks to Michael, everything had changed. He had arranged for her to see top specialists in Ohio, covering every penny of her treatments. Medications, checkups, even a new heart monitor that beeped softly on her wrist, a reassuring presence. Evelyn's cheeks glowed with color, her smile radiant as she moved with an energy Liam hadn't seen in years, her steps lighter, her laughter brighter. She adjusted her silver cross necklace, humming a soft tune as she folded a small shirt of Liam's, her spirit lifted by the chance to keep raising her grandson without the shadow of illness looming over her. "That Michael," she'd say, to Liam, her voice warm with gratitude. "He's an angel in disguise." Liam would grin, nodding proudly, his eyes shining with admiration for the man who'd given his grandma a new lease on life. "He's the best, Grandma," Liam would reply, his voice filled with childlike wonder, his small hands helping her fold the laundry with care. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow through the apartment's small window, Liam helped Evelyn sort laundry in their cozy space. The room was filled with the scent of lavender detergent, and a small radio in the corner played a soft tune, adding to the peaceful atmosphere. The door creaked open, its hinges squeaking softly, and Liam froze, his eyes widening as his parents, Mark and Sarah, stepped inside. They looked different, healthier, their faces no longer shadowed by the haze of addiction that had once defined them. Mark, a tall man with a weary but hopeful smile, wore a simple jacket and jeans, while Sarah, her hair tied back in a neat ponytail, clutched a small bag, her eyes nervous but filled with love. Michael had found them in a struggling rehab program in a nearby city, quietly funding their treatment with the best counselors and facilities in the state. He had also helped them find steady jobs, a warehouse position for Mark, where he could use his strength, and a cashier role for Sarah at a local grocery store, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her silver cross necklace glinting as tears welled up in her eyes. "My babies," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of joy and disbelief, her hands shaking as she stepped toward them. Liam, trembling, took a hesitant step forward, his small frame tense with emotion. "Mom? Dad?" he asked, his voice breaking as tears brimmed in his eyes. Unable to hold back, he ran, crashing into their arms, his small body shaking with sobs of relief. Sarah held Liam close, her arms wrapping around him tightly, her voice thick with emotion. "Michael paid for the best treatment centers in the state. It wasn't easy, but we're here now to make things right," she said, her voice cracking as she kissed the top of Liam's head, her tears falling into his hair. Gripping Evelyn's hand, she turned to Michael, who stood by the door, a soft smile on his face, his presence a quiet pillar of support. Evelyn, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, her hands trembling with emotion, added, "You've done so much, Michael. How can we ever thank you?" Her voice was filled with gratitude, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Michael shook his head, his own eyes misty, his voice steady but emotional. "No, Evelyn, I'm the one who's thankful. When I was a hungry kid, your sandwiches kept me alive. Those small acts of kindness you never thought twice about, they inspired everything I've done. I'm just paying it forward, one act at a time, because you showed me that's how you change the world," he said, his words carrying the weight of years of gratitude, his heart full as he looked at the family before him. Liam looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks, and hugged Michael's leg, his small arms wrapping around him tightly. "You're the best, Mr. Michael," he said, his voice muffled but filled with adoration, his small body trembling with emotion. Evelyn pulled Sarah into her arms, her frail frame strong with love, and Mark lifted Liam, holding him close, their laughter and sobs blending into a symphony of reunion. The family wrapped each other in a tight, joyful embrace, their love filling the tiny room, the warmth of their reunion a beacon of hope. Michael watched, his heart swelling with a quiet joy, knowing that Evelyn's kindness from decades ago had woven this moment of happiness, a moment that would ripple outward, touching more lives than he could ever imagine. As the Carters held each other, the fading light of the day bathed them in a golden glow, a testament to the enduring power of kindness.